Okay, so I'm going to ask you questions about your childhood and your adulthood, so just answer them to the best of your ability.
Okay.
So, the first question is, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Darby. That counts. That's where the hospital was.
Mm-hmm.
But I basically was born in Drexel Hill. I grew up in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania, about 15 minutes outside of the city. Um, it's what they called a what did they call it back then? It was like right after World War II, where all these like suburban towns, people who were war vets and their families moved there. It was like I forget what they called them, like Boomtown or something like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. What was the house? What was the house you grew up in like?
It was great. It was huge. It was a big stone and stucco colonial. It had 3 floors, 5 bedrooms, um, 2 bathrooms, like 2.5 bathrooms, a big basement. It was really cool. It was just like it was had a big backyard and a really nice front porch. And right now, I don't know how much they would cost, but my father paid $16,000 for it in
Wow,
1966, which you can't even buy a car for today.
it's really crazy how that stuff's changed.
Hmm.
Sticking with the house stuff, just describe the neighborhood that the house was in.
Um, it was very suburban, not like how like developments are now, because it was um, like just a straight street, and all the houses were made the same basically, but they weren't the exact same house. Like every house on the street practically was different. Um, yeah, it was a pretty wide street. It was great. There was a ton of kids.
Mm-hmm.
There was we had a lot of fun there, and I guess
And
that's it.
didn't you guys like never really like you didn't really have to like let your parents know like when you were like leaving and you could just be out till
Oh
like
yeah, yeah. We
whatever.
referred to it when you used to open the door and let your kids and your dog out.
Yeah.
So we'd go outside to play and basically stay out all day until you hear the parents start calling their kids home for dinner. That was
Mm-hmm.
basically what it is. But we always were just on our street for the most
Yeah.
part, unless we all went like as a troop somewhere else, which we did a few times.
Can't do that anymore
Not
because
really.
of
Mm-mm.
bad things in the world.
And you did seriously let your dogs out. So like we had a dog. I had a dog growing up, and he'd be out there running around with us, like no
Yeah.
leash, no nothing.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. What was like? Do you have a vivid memory you can think of, like your first vivid memory of like when you were a child? Is there something that
I
stands out?
do. I have a very vivid memory of when I was 3. We moved into that house when I was 3 years old, and
You can remember something from when you were
well, it's
three.
because of what happened. It was traumatic. I used to play on the steps. There was a stairwell that like you would come up from the kitchen. There was one that came up from the kitchen and one that came up from the living room, and then there were stairs in the middle. And I used to sit on those stairs in the middle and play. There was a big window in front of it. It was like a great, and they were really wide. It was a great little play spot. So one day I was going up the steps and I tripped and I hit the banister, the rail, and I got a bloody nose. And I remember it because I was only 3 years old, but it was when we first moved in. But yeah, I remember that. And I also remember that when I used to play on those steps, I used to play school.
Mm-hmm.
And
You
I
used to play
had,
school on the steps.
I used to have, when we lived in the house that we lived in before that, my best friend's name was Hope Cesarini. And I missed her terribly. I was only 3 years old, but I missed her so much.
Mm-hmm.
So I had like a pretend friend, and I called her Hopi McGillicuddy. So she and me and Hopi McGillicuddy and I would play school on the steps.
Oh my gosh. Um, do you know why you were given like your first and your middle name? Like, was there anything?
My sister Kathy named me. She is 11 years older than me. Yeah. So she was 11, and I think I was kind of an oops baby because I'm the fifth child, and there's 5 years in between my brother and I, and everybody else
Mm-hmm.
is like a year and a
Older.
half, 2 years apart. So I think like that was a thing to let her be like she was in charge. So she named me Susan. Don't know why.
And then what about Marie?
Um, I
Was
don't
there
know where
anything?
that came from. I think we just all have nun names. Like
Oh.
my sisters and I, we sound like a convent. And because it's Sister Catherine Dolores, Sister Monica Mary,
Oh yeah.
Sister Mary Teresa, and Sister Susan Marie.
Wait, so all those nuns so like Aunt Monica, they have like the same middle name as
Well, no, it
the
just sounds
nun?
like nuns would have back in the
Oh.
day. That's the way nuns
Yeah.
like they didn't have their regular name; they chose a name.
Mm-hmm.
So all of us just sound like we're a convent. Like they're just names that went together.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna talk about like sort of your parents a little bit.
Okay.
Um. So, which parent was more strict, do you think? And do you have a vivid memory of something you were disciplined for?
Yes, and yes. I think my father was more strict than my mother. I don't have a lot of memories of my mom and dad. My dad died when I was young, as you know, and he was sick off and on a lot through my life. So there's like big chunks where I don't really remember him being around. But he was the guy that was like tough and gruff. Like if you were going to get in trouble by dad, it was big time. And this, I don't actually remember this so much, but I think maybe I remember it because it's a story I've heard like a million times. And I don't know how old I was. I'm maybe 4 or 5, something like that. And we were in church, and it was not Christmas. And I was singing at the top of my lungs, "Oh, Christmas tree," and I wouldn't stop. So my father picked me up and dragged me down the aisle in church like a football carry. And the whole time that he was dragging me down the aisle, I was yelling. It's even hard for me to say now. Yelled fart, yelled fart, yelled fart.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah.
I just love how you were saying a Christmas tree.
I know.
But
it wasn't Christmas.
Wait, how old were you then?
I must have been like 4 or 5,
Oh
something
my
like
gosh.
that.
That's hilarious.
Oh, Christmas tree.
Okay, and I know that you said you don't remember like much about like your dad.
I remember like bigger things. I don't remember like day-to-day stuff. I like there's things that stick out in my head. He smoked cigars, and he always had a stogie in his mouth. Always. I don't think unless we were like in church or at some place where you couldn't smoke. He always had one. Like I have memories of him putting up the Christmas lights in his all beat up black leather bomber jacket. I mean, he must have had this since like he was like 25 years old. It was the most beat up jacket I've ever seen in my life. And he'd be up on a ladder with a little stogie sticking out of his mouth,
while putting up a Christmas tree.
Not Christmas tree, the Christmas lights on the porch outside. And I remember like always like kissing him goodnight, and he'd have to take that stogie out of his mouth so you could kiss him goodnight. And I remember him being down the shore. We went down the shore every summer. And I remember him a lot at the beach. He did a lot of very interesting things at the beach because he just did not care. It's terrible. He'd be like laying on the towel, and he would have gas, and he would like roll onto his side and like let it go, and loud, like people all over the place could hear it, and we would be mortified. And then he also used to, this is when you could obviously smoke in restaurants and stuff. So he'd light that cigar up if we'd go out for dinner. And I remember this like in being down the shore and going out for dinner. He'd light that cigar up after dinner, and he'd be smoking a stogie, and he would flick the ashes on the ground. And we were like, "Dad, this is a restaurant. You can't do that." Did they have like
ashtrays too?
They didn't have them like on the tables like at dinner. Like some people would put their ashes in their, like would smoke cigarettes and put them in their plate. It was just really disgusting. But he would fling the ashes on the floor, and we'd be like, "Dad, you can't do that." And he'd be like, "What? They have to vacuum. They have that thing." So that was very interesting.
So yeah, I was gonna ask about like ask you to describe your parents' marriage.
My parents' marriage was very interesting. It's funny, these questions that you're asking, they're all stuff that I do have answers for that really stick out in my head. When I was younger, my parents fought a lot. And I didn't understand it. Like, it was bad sometimes, like really, really bad. I remember always like being afraid they were going to split up. And they went to counseling. I remember that they went to counseling. And years later, I realized / found out that that part of their marriage, which was for my mom and dad, the last 10 years of their marriage, which was the first 10 years of my life, he was really sick off and on. And he had liver disease, so it's very painful, and it's really a horrible, horrible disease. So when you're sick, you're super sick. And so he was grouchy a lot, and they fought. And I think also my mom knew that he was dying and wasn't very accepting of that.
And also she had all the kids. Like,
yeah. I mean, they were older, because you figure if I was 10, they were all like the youngest one would be Vince, who was 15, but everybody else would be like 18 through 20, whatever. No, I don't know what ages they were. But, so I think there was a lot of trouble that way, that she was having a hard time accepting that he was dying, and he was sick, and he was grouchy. So that was part of it. But when they weren't having those kinds of issues, they had a really good marriage. They had a lot of good friends. They threw parties. They had fun. They, trying to think if they were affectionate. Like, I don't think I ever saw them hold hands or hug or kiss or anything, but people didn't do that in the 70s. So, well, old, parents didn't do that in the 70s. But it was a very good marriage when things were good.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of understandable, like, why.
When I was little, I didn't get it, because I didn't really understand that my dad was sick. But when I got older, I realized it, and then I also had like many discussions with my mom about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, they loved each other a lot.
That's good. Where I want to go next. Let's see. So, how did your family earn money? So I guess your parents did.
My dad was a buyer for a company called ITE. He bought parts for circuit breakers, and he was a white collar guy. He was a suit, and he worked there my entire life. I think he worked there he probably worked there right out of Villanova. He went to college after he got out of the Army, and that was probably like his first and only job. And he worked there forever. My mom worked part-time when I was a kid, and she had a lot of like interesting jobs. She worked for a company called Columbia School of Broadcasting, which actually is still in business today, but it's called like something else, School of Broadcasting, like a state, Cincinnati or something like that. And there was a guy at the time who was a big Philadelphia DJ. His name was Wee Willie Weber, and my mom was his secretary, and that was like her little brush with fame. But she did that, and then she worked for a couple other like insurance agencies.
Did people struggle with money like the way they do today?
They did. I think a lot of people struggled with money. My family was very fortunate because my father had a really good job. He was really like rolling in the dough. I think he made about $12,000 a year. Took care of 5 kids with that, and his mother-in-law. But people did. I mean, like, for instance, Uncle Frank drove a pure labor truck, and he also had 5 kids, and it was a whole different set of circumstances because he had like an hourly wage that was probably really low at the time, and it was more difficult. So it all depended on your job. Jobs weren't as hard to get as they are now. There weren't as many people vying for the same jobs, and people stayed with companies forever, like my dad did, and got paid, decent amounts of money.
Yeah. Speaking of jobs, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I always wanted to be an artist. I didn't know what a graphic designer was. I thought that I wanted to be a painter. that's how I would like make money and make a fortune. But I always wanted to do something in art. I never wanted to do anything else.
This sort of goes back to like your family, but how did you guys celebrate holidays like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and all that?
Oh, big, giant affairs. They
Like
were
family
huge.
parties?
For Thanksgiving every year, we had my grandfather, my dad's father, and my Aunt Mary, and sometimes her partner Claire. Um, so we'd have like a big dinner. Well, there were a lot of us to begin with, and then everybody started getting married, so there were spouses, and then eventually children. Um, but Thanksgiving was a big deal. We'd have the big turkey dinner, and my grandmother lived with us too, so she was there. Christmas was always really big. We'd have a Christmas Eve party every year, and the neighbors would come, the friends would come. At some point, Aunt Jean and Uncle Frank and all of their kids would come, so it was always a big thing.
Big celebration.
Yep. Yeah, I remember Christmas as very fondly growing up, that it was just a great fun thing.
Yeah. What do you think is different about growing up today versus when you were growing up?
You don't have that extended family unless you live really close in the same neighborhoods. Like, we had, like, Aunt Jean and Uncle Frank's family was part of our family. Growing up, cousins were all close. They were like my sisters and brothers. The neighbors, we had my mom's really good friends, the Wards that lived up the street, same thing with their kids. It was kind of more of that extended family. You were really friendly with everybody on the street, so you had a big gang of kids that you hung out with. And these days, it's not so much like that. Families spread out. They go to different places, different states for jobs. Neighborhoods aren't like they used to be because of the fear of just letting your kid out and safety, and you have to drive people everywhere, and there's activities as opposed to just going out and playing.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit.
It's okay.
Did you have any dreams or goals, like, when you graduated from high school? Well, you said you wanted to be an artist.
Yeah, when I graduated from high school, I wanted to go to art school. My dream was that I would go to art school in New York. I really, really, really wanted to go to New York for art school. But again, being the youngest of 5, and I was the last one in the house, my mother bribed me to stay in Philadelphia by helping me buy a car. So I did not go to New York, and I do regret that a little bit, but I think that
where did you go to school?
I went to the Art Institute of Philadelphia. It was fun. I mean, it was fun. I had a great time. I learned a lot. I loved going there, but I missed that whole like New York experience that I really wanted to have. But it was all good. Sorry, Donald Trump.
And are there any like inventions that you remember like happening?
Inventions like the internet?
Yeah.
Oh my God! The first thing was cable TV was a big, huge deal. We were, I guess my dad was still alive, so I was in grade school, and we got cable, and we were just like, wow. Because originally, for most of my life, when I was a kid growing up, there was 3 channels, 3, 6, and 10, ABC, NBC, and CBS. And then there were a couple.
And it was on black and white, right?
For a while, and then it was color. I don't know when that happened. That I don't really remember the switch over, but there was like these UHF channels that was like 48, 29, and 17. I can't believe I remember the numbers. And those were like the fun shows and stuff, like the Munsters and all that. It was like reruns. It would be kind of like how some of the like cable shows channels are now.
Yeah.
But that was it. And then we got cable, Prism. Oh my God. It was like this box that had all these little buttons on it that you pushed. And there was probably, it went from like 6 channels to maybe like 50. And that was huge, like 50 channels.
Compared to like God. The 4 that.
Yeah, I mean 6 total. Yeah. Like, and you couldn't even 3 of them. You could hardly even get all the time. You'd have to like adjust the antenna. It was horrible. they had, and Prism had like all the sports, like you get flyers and stuff, so my dad could actually like watch that stuff instead of listening on the radio. And they had HBO was back then, so you had movies that you could watch, so that was amazing.
Yeah.
That was the first big round of technology, and then
was it cell phones? Like,
probably cell phones and the internet kind of all started happening at the same time. I remember email when email first started, and your dad was like always Mr. Technology. He always wanted to be part of like the next big thing. And he and his friends, he had the band then, so he would like send them emails, and I would be like, why are you using this email? That, like, just call them. What's the deal? And like that wasn't even that long ago. That was when you know, I guess Jesse was a baby when that started. And then the internet, the first big thing with the internet was MySpace.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, Dad was big on that. I didn't do it. When I was in art school, they started having Macs. This was pre-internet, but the beginning of this. So we worked on Macs. It's funny because I had a computer class, computer art class that I never went to. It was on Fridays and I never went. And that's what I do for a living now. I work on a computer doing that, which is kind of ironic, but I did okay in that class.
How did you do okay with not going?
Well, towards the end, my professor said, you know, you've never been here except for the first class. And I was like, yeah, it's true. So he said, if you can get all the assignments done before the end of they were trimesters, then I'll pass you. So I just worked really, really hard and lost a lot of sleep and got everything done. And he actually gave me a B because I did a good job. It wasn't just passed. He couldn't give me an A because I never showed up for class. But yeah, that was really stupid because I wound up paying for that big time in lack of sleep. But so yeah, I'm thinking the cell phones. Oh my God, that was another one. The big thing in the beginning,
the big, like, bricks.
Yeah, I had that big bag phone. It was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
But like really rich people would have car phones. Like, was it hardwired to your phone, to your car?
Was it like a landline, like in the car, sort of?
No, it was a cell phone, but that was brand new. But it was hardwired to the car. Like you didn't carry it around with you. And it was like Dad's boss, who was like this, like really like highfalutin New York salesman, just, you know, really cool. He was the first one who had one. And we were moving to Bucks County from Delaware County, and we were trying to build a house. In the meantime, we were living with Grandma and Pop in Haddonfield, New Jersey. And I was working at University of Pennsylvania, and I was going over the bridge from Philly to New Jersey, and I had a blowout on the bridge, so I had to pull over to this gas station, this really sketchy neighborhood. And I tried to change my tire. I was 24, I think, something like that. No idea how to change a tire. And I'm in my little like dress shorts and blouse from work. It was the middle of the summer, and sorry about the change of scenery. We're having technical difficulties with this video. Anyway, so with all that, I made Dad take me to Silos and buy me a bag phone, which was ridiculous and like this big, and had a huge handset, and it was just like the coolest thing ever. So that's that.
So then, what was your first real job?
My first real job was, would that be like the 13-year-old one when I was a waitress? No, my first job out of art school? Yeah. I went to work for a company called Downham Printing. It was one of my mom's clients, and it was in the world's worst neighborhood. I was frightened for my life every day when I drove there, but it was a big print shop, and I worked like up on the second floor, which was a big dirty loft, but it had a really cool art room, no computer. Did it all by hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
So this is sort of getting a little more like deep. But is there a like specific person or situation that had a profound effect on the way that you look at life?
Yeah, I would say my mom for sure, because she was 49 when her husband died and had been through a lot with him being sick all those years. But still, my brother and I were still at home, and my grandmother lived with us. So it was hard. It was really hard for her, and she struggled and had to raise a kind of wild 13-year-old daughter at the time. And she was just really strong, and she did well, and she took care of us. We went to college. Um, she fought for us to get our college paid for by the GI Bill, because what my father died from was a war-related injury. And so she made a big impact on me, especially because now I am a single mother. So I had a good example for how to be a single mother and how to raise your kids by yourself.
And is there anything that you know now that you wish you'd known when you were young?
Pretty much everything. That it really doesn't matter what other people think of you, that you should make your own decisions based on your gut feelings and what's really in your heart. To have faith in myself and the future. That was a thing that I think, because when I was so young when my dad died, I felt like the rug got pulled out from under me. And I was really afraid of change, and I didn't think things were safe, and I just felt like you couldn't count on the future because you didn't know what was going to happen next. And it took me a while to learn that I can do pretty much anything that I set my mind to. I know that sounds cliche, but it's true. I was afraid of a lot of things, and I did not try things or do things because I was afraid, and I have realized that fear is not an option.
So it sort of like has to do with that, but like, do you think a person needs to first overcome serious setbacks or challenges to be truly successful?
I think that yes, that you learn from every big setback, that they're important, because when you don't have them, you don't learn the skills of what you need to do to overcome them. It's important to have challenges, or you just don't grow.
So if a young person came up to you asking, what's the most important thing for living a good life, what would you say?
The most important thing for living a good life is love, not being afraid to give it, not being afraid to receive it, belief in yourself, and just guts. Guts are important. Life is hard. Sometimes you just have to stick your neck out and go, okay, we'll see what happens. And if you fail, you're going to learn from it. And if you succeed, you're going to learn from that too. But that's always awesome.
So then if you could sum up the lessons that you've learned, like throughout all your experiences, like can you pick out any like specific lessons
that I've learned? Yeah. Don't let fear rule your life. Don't let fear make you make decisions. Like, don't make decisions based on fear, because they're never going to be you're never going to get what you want. They're never going to be what you want. That's going to be you settling for what doesn't scare you.
And that's about it.
All right. Thank you for this interview. Sorry about all the technical difficulties. We'll see what it looks like. Bye.